Welcome to another edition of Talking with Kevin and Son. And today, this is part two of a series, The Truth, the Lie, Sex Trafficking, part two. Today, we have a featured guest. She happens to be an author, motivational speaker, actress. This is going to sound funny, a stripper, and she's a stand up comedian. But the biggest thing is she's an activist for women's rights. I want to welcome, and along with my co host today, Kristen Seymour, I'm going to introduce the world to Miss Christy Monroe. Welcome to Talking with Kevin and Son. How you doing?
Hello.
Hey,
Good. Happy to be here.
hey, happy to be here. I'm going to add a little bit more. Just wanted to, for my listeners, we want to tell you this episode is brought to you by RMK Productions and the 10 United Podcast Network. Through the power of story, our mission is to uplift, share stories, and inspire people, share experiences and perspectives using the framework of teaching, learning, and modeling. Our purpose is hope, helping other people every day. Now, I just want to give you a recap, as this is the first time you've tuned in and listened to this. The conversation of sex trafficking, the conversation of slavery, the conversation of abuse in juvenile children is a global problem. And we are assembling a group of people to share stories, to provide resources and access to people that are needing help. And hopefully some part of this conversation will allow us to take these predators off the streets and give these people a second chance of life. So this is where hope comes in. And our special guest today is going to share something very personal. I don't know where this is going to go. So I've got a list of questions and probably I won't get any of them answered because she's probably going to give them all. So Christy, welcome. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
All right. So your background. I heard a little bit about some martial arts experience. If you've impacted about 300 kids throughout the world. I've heard a little bit about you taking on another craft as far as a stripper and then a comedian. Can you kind of break down each facet of that life and bring us fast forward to where we're at today and in today's present conversation and how they all tie in?
Yeah. The easiest way is to tell the whole entire story from the beginning to the end. Do you want the story?
You know something, this stage is yours. And because we want to make a difference in someone's life and hopefully we'll help save someone's life. So go ahead from the beginning. It's all yours. You have no time limit and there's no cut or whatever. Do your thing.
Okay. I was born into what I thought was a really normal middle class family. I had a mom and a dad and a younger brother and an older sister. We went to private Catholic school. We skied. We went on vacations. I thought everything was normal. On February 3rd, 2000, when I was 11 years old in sixth grade, I woke up on a Thursday morning and my dad committed suicide in my living room. And I found out a few years later that the entire time he had a really serious heroin addiction and that my mother always had to take second mortgages out on the house, and that the reason we would go on vacation but my dad couldn't come was because he was going to rehab or jail. And so, all those things I didn't know as a kid. Right after my dad died, my mother started dating my brother's baseball coach, who was married and had 3 kids. And she got like life insurance money and Social Security survivors benefits. And she was spending all that money on drugs and alcohol. And her boyfriend would like wake up in the morning and tell his wife that he was going to work, and then he would go to our house and drink and do drugs with my mom. And then she would give him more money to like bring home to his wife to prove that he was at work that day. And so it got pretty bad. And then he started molesting me, and my mom started beating the crap out of me and broke my collarbone. And she would like disappear for pretty significant amounts of time. And so then rewind to the beginning of the story, I started doing martial arts with my dad when I was 3 years old. And then when I was 11, he died 2 days before we were supposed to test for our black belts together.
Oh.
So that was kind of a really big push for me to continue on with martial arts. So all the while that my mother's dating my brother's married baseball coach, my martial arts instructor was this like Korean guy, and he was married to this Korean woman. And so, still training. And then, long story short, I don't know whether or not my mother was sleeping with my martial arts instructor, but one day his wife came into the school and flipped out, and I had to leave. And so then, right before I turned 13, my mom's boyfriend raped me, and then I went into foster care. And I met this other martial arts instructor who kind of took me under his wing, and I would train at his school every day after school, and in exchange, like, clean the mats and answer phone calls and stuff like that. And so then, when I was about 15, my mom was regaining custody of me, and her drug habit was like totally out of control, and the foster care system didn't really care. Like, I had been in care too long in their eyes, and they just wanted to get rid of me. So they sent me back to live at her house. And then she met this guy, and he came over to our house, and they were sitting at the kitchen table, and they were talking about money, but like I didn't really know what was going on. And then next thing I knew, I was in his truck, and we were driving.
What state were you in at this point?
I started out in New Jersey, and then he took me to Plainview, Long Island.
Okay.
So then we're in Plainview, Long Island. And then basically I came to find out later on that the money that he and my mother were talking about was the agreement that he was going to give her money weekly, and that as long as he kept giving her money, she wasn't going to ask where the hell I was. So it started out where, like, I thought he was like my boyfriend, and he was feeding me, which was pretty dope because my mother wasn't feeding me. And he like took me to get my hair cut and stuff like that. And so I thought that it was good.
Do you mind how old you were at this time? At
I
that
was
time?
I was 15.
And how old was the man?
He was 27. And so then basically he would do like really, really crazy things, and he would just like fly into these like insane rages for no reason, like over literally nothing. And I didn't really like fully understand what was going on. And at that point in my life, at 15 years old, I had not seen a lot of naked men. So like I was really confused by what I was seeing, because his testicles were like very small, and I was like, this seems weird. Like, it was like disproportionately weird, and I really didn't understand what was going on. So then one day I was digging around underneath this bed that he would make me live on in this basement that he locked me in. And I found this metal briefcase and I popped it open, and inside the metal briefcase was all these vials with pictures of like bovine creatures. And so I pulled out all these vials and I went on like Google and typed it in, and they were steroids for cattle from Mexico. And there were like thousands of syringes in this like thing. So basically he was injecting himself with cow.
Testosterone, animal
Yeah.
testosterone.
Yeah. And so he like grew man boobs, and then he took me to this place which I thought was a doctor's office, but like even at 15 I was like, this seems kind of weird. It was in like a really really super sketchy like um strip mall, and it was very unclean. And so anyway, I'm 15 years old and they take me and him into this back room and lay him down on this bed, and there's this metal table and they like injected him with a bunch of stuff and gave him like a bunch of painkillers or whatever. And then this person who was like clearly, like at the time I was like, okay, maybe this is a doctor, but like in retrospect this is clearly not a doctor. He cut off the like pedophile's nipples and then put his nipples on this table and then used a liposuction machine and was like sucking his man boobs out. And so then he like sewed his nipples back on. And I was like, I don't know, I was like really confused because I was 15. I didn't really understand what was going on. So then basically he freaked out after that happened, and I didn't know how to drive an automatic car, let alone a manual truck. But he was like, you have to drive me. And I was like, I don't know how to drive. He's like, well, you're going to learn right now.
So
So
he brought you there for transportation when he was released. Yeah.
I guess. So now he was like really, really high, and he was demanding that I bring him to a liquor store, and he was beating the crap out of me while I'm trying to learn to drive a manual truck by myself on Long Island where the traffic is insane. And so we get to this liquor store and he like buys a bunch of liquor and he's drinking it and like screaming at me to drive him home. And he kept saying that if I looked in the rear view mirror, then like I wasn't a good driver. So like I wasn't allowed to look in the rear view mirror. And if I did, he would like back fist me. And so anyway, basically we got back to this house, and over the next like couple days, I guess like the blood supply to his nipples got cut off, and so they were like rotting off of his body. So he like made me inject him with cortisone into like his rotting nipples, and then also into these like acne welts that were growing on his back. And so anyway, he like fucking lost his mind after that happened, and he took me to this hotel room in Pennsylvania, and I was like really confused. I was like, oh, okay, we're on vacation, because his nipples are rotting off his body. And so then basically, like long story short, I thought we were at this hotel for like a vacation, and we go into the room and there's this man like smoking in the room, and I'm like, in my mind I'm like, oh, this is weird, why would there be like a man smoking in our hotel room? And then long story short, like a whole bunch of men showed up, like 15 of them, and they were like old, and like I got the impression that they were like truckers or like something to that extent. Anyway, long story short, Brian,
Christy,
what?
If this is painful for you to talk about, you don't have to. I
It's
just
okay.
want you to- All right.
I mean, if you don't want to hear about it,
No,
I won't.
go ahead. I just don't want to put you in a state of mind where we're trying to help people and all of a sudden I put you in harm's way, and I don't want that to be the case.
I don't know. I'm fine.
All right.
Uh,
Go ahead.
okay, so then long story short, Brian gathered all these people into the bathroom, and then they watched and took pictures and filmed while he beat the shit out of me and raped me. And I actually have no memories whatsoever of it except for my face being right next to the drain and like my blood like going past my face and like just watching the red blood swirl around in the drain, and it was really really slimy. And so then that was over, and he like drove me back to Long Island, and I was like really beat up and basically just went back to that house. um and so then uh somewhere in here he stole this woman's identity, and her name was Virginia Hurdle. And he like spent a pretty long time building up her credit so that it had like, I don't know, like $300,000 in credit card amount of money. And so then I don't know, I slept off the trauma of like whatever had happened. And so then like all of a sudden one day, these like trucks showed up and they delivered 10 Gixxer 1000 motorcycles and a bunch of furniture from Wayfair and a bunch of like flat screen TVs and all this stuff. And the person who owned the house that all of this was happening in, he was like a young guy in his early 20s who he must have like inherited the house from a grandparent or something. He just like was renting the basement to this guy. He didn't know what was going on down there. Like he didn't know who the hell I was. Like he was like really not involved. But basically he was like, what the hell is all this stuff? You need to get the hell out of here. So
Living there too?
him,
Yeah, did he live upstairs or was it just two guys in the residence?
he
If you remember, I don't know.
yeah, he did live, he was like upstairs sometimes, but I think he maybe had like an apartment in Manhattan or something to that extent. I'm not really sure. I only ever saw him like twice ever. Um, but so then he was like, to Brian, he was like, you need to leave. And so he had like 2 weeks to leave. So then what happened? In that 2 weeks, he made me go in the backyard with like a wrench or whatever and disassemble all of the Gixxer 1000s and then take individual photographs of every single part of them and then sell them on eBay. And then he took the frames of the motorcycles to his brother's house in Center Merches and shaved off the VIN numbers on the frames and buried them under like a bunch of concrete. Um, and so
Well,
then he took,
I'm assuming the motorcycles were stolen and he was fencing.
they were bought on this woman's credit cards.
Mhm.
This like, so it was a stolen identity, and he like built it up to have like $300,000, and then all of a sudden all these trucks had come and they dropped off all these motorcycles and stuff like furniture and all this other stuff.
So he just was reselling all that stuff
Yeah,
in parts or in whole.
yeah, to like I guess he made like a lot of money off of that scam. So then he took me to Roosevelt Field Mall and took me to JC Penney, and basically he was like, I want you to buy lingerie. And like basically he was like, what happened in the hotel room in Pennsylvania, like we're going to do it again, but we're going to have more people there and like we're going to make a lot more money. And I was like, what? And I'm like 15, holding like this armful of like lingerie, and I'm like looking down at this lingerie, and I'm like, this is what I'm gonna die in. Like, I'm gonna die if this happens. He's gonna kill me. So then we get to the cash register at JCPenney, and the lady, like, Brian is like Polish. He's like a Polish white guy. And the lady looks at like the credit card that says Virginia Hurdle, and he's like, and the lady's like, I need a CID for this. And Brian was like, oh, it's in the car. I'll be right back. And so I'm like standing there with this lingerie, and this woman's looking at me, and Brian's gone now, and I know that I'm gonna die if I stay. So then I was like, I gotta go. I just like dropped the lingerie and I ran. And I went outside of the mall, and I met this kid who told me his name was Scott, and he was homeless, and he was like, you can come with me. And I was like, okie dokie, let's go. And I followed him to like this dusty parking lot, and there was this school bus there. And I get on the school bus, and there was this girl who, or woman, whatever, who owned the school bus. And Scott was talking to her and was like asking her if I could go with them. And I'm like, it was like a sensory overload. I was like in the school bus, and it looked like the bunk beds that the Holocaust victims slept in. Like, they were like made out of plywood, but like very, very close together. And then the ceiling of the bus had like nets, and in the nets were like clothes and pots and pans and children's toys. And it was like dark, and there was stuff hanging everywhere. And there was like, it was like very weird. And I was like, so Scott's like talking to this woman about me coming with them, and I'm looking in the back of the bus, and I see something move, and I'm like, what is going on? And so this woman is like, come here. And it's her children, who were 3 and 2 years old, and the boy's name was Lake, and the girl's name was Prism. And they were born on that bus, and they didn't have social security numbers, and they'd never seen a doctor, and their belly buttons were like purple and long and infected. And they were just like 2 little wild children that didn't bathe ever, and like their hair was all matted. And so then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go with these people. This seems like a good idea.
So let me make sure that we're following you. You have now escaped from Brian, and from the way that you tell it, you weren't aware that you had escaped. Had you up until that point had any formal education as far as schooling is concerned at 15?
So yeah, I went to school. Um, I went to private Catholic school until 5th grade, and then there was going to be like a gap year because I guess my dad, I don't know what the hell he was doing, but I was going to go to public school for 6th grade, so I did. And then my dad committed suicide in the middle of the year in 6th grade. And then I went from being like a straight A perfect student to like straight Fs and like crying hysterically every day in school. And
So
so
sorry, Christine.
what?
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So yeah, in 7th grade, I went to this private chartered school, and I loved it. Like, my whole life turned around. I thought everything was gonna be okay. I was like, everything was great and totally innocent, like for real, for real. I had no idea what was going on. I wasn't in trouble. For some reason, one day I was in the principal's office, and his door was like kind of ajar, and the secretary was like sitting at the desk, and I could see into my principal's office, and I saw him like very passionately kiss my language arts teacher. And not knowing what was going on, I turned to the secretary and I was like, "Aw, that's cute." And she was like, "Mr. McCullough is very happily married." And I was like, okay. And then later that day, I got called into the principal's office, and my foster mom got called in, and they expelled me. So I was pretty sad about that.
So,
Um,
let me make sure I'm following you. You went from 15, you went across a couple of states.
oh
Brian,
no, wait, we've rewinded. Now we're in seventh grade. I think I was like 12 in this story.
so now we're at
Um, what?
now we're at 17 years of age.
No, seventh grade,
Okay.
12 years old. Yeah. Sorry. We went fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade. I went back.
Let's fast forward. After
Well, hold on, because we're getting there. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay. Eighth grade, public school. Ninth grade, I started high school. And then 10th grade is when Brian, the pedophile, showed up. And he had me drop out of high school, and like I'm not being like cocky or anything. I'm very smart. So anyway, I dropped out of high school, and 3 days later got my good enough diploma. And then he enrolled me in college at the local community college, and he did that so that the social workers wouldn't come looking for me. And so actually now, way fast forward to this current moment in my life, I'm trying to apply to law school, and they look at your GPA, and I have to like awkwardly explain to them like, oh, sorry, that first semester of college I was a human trafficking victim, so that's why my grades are so bad. Anyway, rewind.
But fast forward to today. As of today, you were just taking your LSAPs. Am I correct?
Yeah.
All right. Congratulations. And
Thank you.
That's over with. So I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. Can you tell us is Brian still on the street, or is Brian incarcerated?
No, Brian is running a medical facility in Scottsdale, Arizona, with his literally Russian mail order bride, who claims that she's a doctor, and she's certainly not. And she wears a white coat, and he wears scrubs, and they run this medical facility that's really not a medical facility. And I have no doubt that he is victimizing many, many people right now.
All right. So I do need to say this, because I do have to have a disclaimer, because unless we know factual information, we need to stick with the facts.
Okay. Fact: he is running an illegal medical facility. Fact: his wife is not a medical doctor. Fact: she has people call her Dr. Borikowski. Fact: she wears a white coat. Like, I mean, these are facts.
All right. Now, why hasn't the authorities been aware of Brian's behavior?
They are now. So let's see. 2020, pandemic thing happened, and I went back to college, and I became a guardian ad litem and started volunteering with the Anti-Predator Project. And through them, I met this group called Lawyers to the Rescue, and they wanted me to do what's happening right now, like this kind of conversation with the board of directors from Camilla's House, which has a human trafficking division. So an attorney on that board of directors heard this story and was like, we have to do something. And I was like, okay. So she helped me draft several letters to the FBI, and the FBI called me, and I have like some incredible evidence that they were like, wow. I actually have it right here.
All right, you can just stay right here. You don't have to approve it right now, because I want to make sure that we don't, if there's an investigation, we don't do anything that will hurt the investigation.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, you probably shouldn't talk about this. Yeah.
Feel
Long
like you
story
got
short.
support from them and they listened to you
What?
at Camilla House, and you feel like you were supported by them and they had resources and
No, they wanted me to help them because they don't know how to deal with human trafficking victims. So it just that person who was a lawyer, she, like, not connected to Camilla's House, she decided to help me draft this letter for the FBI.
That seems to be the case with our authorities. I mean, the private sector seems to be doing a lot more than the people that are sworn to protect. Not saying that there aren't some that are trying, but that there's some that just aren't trying. And so, I'm glad that you have a team of people that is putting things into action in order to take at least one of these people, if not many of these people, off the streets. And again, I'll share the sentiments the same way with Kristen, is that I'm a father. This is a horrible thing that has happened. I mean, I'm enraged. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I've had conversations since I've met Christine that people in my area don't even know about. I don't know if they're turning a blind eyes to it. When I find out my local mall here in Pennsylvania, the King of Prussia Mall, is a hub for sex trafficking, which I didn't know. It seems to be one of the best kept secrets. And when I see someone that tells a story of 15 years of age, and a parent hands a child, someone they brought into the world, over to someone that day in, day out, years molest you, and then shares you with other people. I will say first, it breaks my heart. And then first, it makes me want to go ahead and take action and make sure that these people never see the light of day again. And that's the reason why we're doing this. And I know I interrupted your story, but I want to make sure that everyone that's listening, especially a young child that's in your predicament, that happens to be listening to, that there is help and there's resources. And reason why Christine Seymour is here, some of those resources she has access. She's a part of Divas Who Win. So Christine, if you just, before we go on with her story, let people know if they're in trouble, how they can get help, who they can contact, and what Divas Who Win is all about.
Well, Christine, I know we spoke about it briefly, and Kevin, we've spoken about it at length before, but Divas Who Win is one of the organizations I work with, and we provide services for survivors of sex trafficking. And that goes everywhere from trauma-informed care to job training, to clothing, to ultimately creating a residential facility, which is what we're trying to do at the moment. We have a capital campaign out there. But people like you, Christine, who have stories, that's how I teach, that's how I train, is to be a storyteller, to tell these stories, because as Kevin said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, do you think when you tell this story that people are just flabbergasted, they've never heard of such a thing? Because most of the people I speak to say, this can't possibly be happening in our neighborhood. It happens in the movies, and it happens, with drug addicts in Thailand. It doesn't happen here.
Mhm.
Is that what you find?
Yeah. Oh, all the time. It happens to me. I'm on a lot of podcasts and a lot of things that get a lot of attention. And one particular time I had agreed to be on this radio show for somebody that I really respected, and told her this story. And then the next episode, like, I hadn't heard it, and somebody who's like pretty famous, I was on his show, and he was like, "Did you hear what so and so was saying about
You
you?"
mention the names.
What?
You can mention the names. It's public knowledge. You can go and mention the names.
I don't want to give her any attention.
All right. And the only reason I said that, I want to make sure that someone else doesn't get ambushed on a radio show, podcast, or television show, of thinking that the host themselves has good intentions.
Yeah, well, this woman, she doesn't matter. No one cares about her, for real.
Right.
Like, she's like a D- level celebrity. So the thing was that the following episode, the episode after mine, she was interviewing like a B-level celebrity, and I guess she opened up with like saying really terrible things about me, saying that I was a liar, that I like told this insane story and there's no way it could be true and all this stuff. And it infuriated me. And then like I kind of like I had like a pretty big online presence. And so I like flew off the handle and just posted like document after photograph after, like, I had so much proof, and I was like, you look like a fool for calling me a liar.
Find, Christine, that victim blaming is when you present your story as a middle class white girl from New Jersey, that people automatically say, oh, she must have made it up. This couldn't possibly be true. I
Yeah.
mean, that is egregious.
Well, and that's like, you know, kind of what I try to explain to people all the time is like, for some unknown reason, people like to sensationalize human trafficking, and like everybody wants to think that it's all about these drugged out prostitutes that have tattoos across their face, and like that represents what human trafficking is. And like, I'm human trafficking. Like, it's normal people, like normal girls that have like, I live in a nice apartment. I am getting a bachelor's degree. Like, I have pets. I'm a normal person. And so it could, I emphasize, and I always say like the name of, I always say Plainview, Long Island. A lot of people know where that is.
Yes.
It's a normal place, like the most normal that you could possibly imagine place. Just everyone has a backyard and a driveway, like they're normal houses. And if it can happen in Plainview, Long Island, it's happening in your town. I guarantee you. And so
If you could look backwards and talk to your 15-year-old self right now, what would you say to her? What would you try to?
And Christine, just to let you know, on this podcast, that is one of the questions we never ever ask.
okay.
But you go ahead and answer it.
Yeah. What would I say to 15-year-old me? I would tell myself to find the good people. And so actually we didn't get to like the end of the story. The
Go
part
ahead
that
and go to the end of the story.
Okay, the part that I told you, that's not the end of the story. Okay, so I was in JCPenney, dropped the lingerie, run away. I end up on this weird school bus. This girl has these children that are 2 and 3 years old. We're like bouncing down I-95, and we ended up in Atlanta. And like, long story short, she wanted to go get high, and she was walking down the street with these 2 children who were 3 and 2 years old that did not have social security numbers. And she just, this random homeless human that she had never met before, she was like, hey, can you watch my kids? And she was just going to leave her 2 and 3-year-old children with this like crazy person. And we got in this huge fight, and I was like, this is insane, what are you doing, stop. And we got in this huge fight. So then I was stranded in Atlanta, never been there before, don't know anyone there, and I didn't know what else to do. I called Brian.
Get to Atlanta from Long Island.
The bus.
Yeah, the school bus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, the school bus was mobile.
Yes, it was mobile.
Okay.
Mobile-esque, did not have shocks. Anyway, so I didn't know what else to do. So I called Brian, and he was like, I'm on my way.
The trusted adult that you, the only adult that you knew, whether he could be trusted or not, but he was the only resource you had. You were alone, right?
Yeah. I mean, he was the only one who I knew was going to come get me. And so like, when you're 15, the thing is, you legally can't check yourself into a homeless shelter. You will get put back in foster care, which is freaking horrible. You don't have a driver's license. You don't have credit cards. You don't have a way to get a bus pass. Like, don't have any, like, there's no plan. And so you're
There's
kind of,
very few resources for minors because you
yeah,
are a minor at that point,
yeah.
as
So
many sex trafficked kids are.
yeah. So anyway, I called Brian and he was like on the next flight there, and he picked me up and then he took me back to um Plainview, Long Island. And the next day we got on a plane and flew to Arizona. And so then he rented this house, and right around this time I turned 16 and I was like, I want to get my driver's license. Like, this is the best. Like, the idea of getting a driver's license to me was like the greatest. And so I wouldn't shut up about it. So he let me get my learner's permit. And that's like one of the great piece of evidences that I have, is that he had rented this house in Arizona, and then my learner's permit is like registered to that house. So then he let me enroll at like another community college out there. And then for some, but then like he basically he was going crazy, and he was telling me that he was gonna take me over the border into Mexico and like sell me and not bring me back, and like that I was just going to be lost in Mexico forever. And like one day we were fighting and I was like, I want to leave, you're freaking crazy. And he like beat the crap out of me, and then he took me to this truck stop in like the middle of downtown Phoenix, and the truck stop was crawling with Mexican prostitutes who were like literally wearing bikinis. And they were like banging on the trucks, and it was dark, and like it was like really scary, and they like started surrounding the car, and he was like screaming at me, and he was like if you disobey me, you're going to be out here with these Mexican prostitutes. And like I don't speak one word of Spanish, so I was like, ah. And so
He
I was like, really,
threats people all the time. It was just a relationship of coercion and threats.
yeah. So anyway, then like he backfisted me in my mouth really hard, and for some reason I don't remember why this happened, but I had to have my wisdom teeth taken out. And so then he I had like some pain meds from that, and my face was like swollen like a chipmunk. And he kept sliding pain pills in my mouth and then like sticking a straw in my mouth to make me swallow the pain pills so that he could rape me without me like protesting, because I was like, I just really wanted to heal from my wisdom teeth being taken out. And so he kept doing that and not giving me any food. So then I started throwing up, and the vomit ripped open the stitches in my mouth, and then I was swallowing the blood and throwing it back up, and it was like a repeat pattern. I probably swallowed and threw up blood like 100 times in a couple of minutes. And so he put me in the car, and he was like driving me to the emergency room, and he was like screaming at me the entire time, and he was like, you need to tell them you're 18, and you need to tell them a fake name. And like he was like yelling at me, and he's like, as soon as they're done, you need to call me. And I was like, okay, like just get me to the hospital. So I got to the hospital, and I told them that I was 18 and made up a fake name and everything. I think I was there a few days, but I don't even remember, because they gave me morphine and re-stitched up my mouth and whatever they did. So then they discharged me, and I walked out of the hospital.
Did I ask you before you were discharged, Christine, if you needed help?
No. And so I walked out, and I was standing on the sidewalk debating whether or not to call Brian. And then this like blind girl that had a seeing eye dog that was like a beautiful golden retriever, and it was Arizona, so it's really hot. So the seeing eye dog had like boots on its feet, and the boots were Arizona State University boots, and the dog had like a Arizona State University bandana around its neck, and the girl was carrying books. So in my mind, I was like, oh, this girl must be going to that college. I'll follow her. So I very quietly followed this blind girl to freedom. And so
Let me ask you a question, because I'm trying to tie everything together.
Yeah.
You had escaped from Brian once.
Yeah.
When you were 15.
Uh-huh.
Right? Then when you needed help, you called the person you escaped from.
Yeah.
And you went back.
Uh-huh.
All right. You keep saying he raped me, and I know you're a teenager, and it is rape.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to make sense why you went back, and knowing that you went back into that same situation.
Because I was starving.
All right. I just, because people are
Kevin,
listening, people are
Kevin,
listening.
just so you know, Kevin, for somebody that works with survivors, it is very, very usual, very, very common for all kinds of abuse for people to return to their abusers. And there are many reasons for that, and not just a Stockholm syndrome, but because of the circumstance, like Christine was mentioning. Minors especially have tremendous challenges with being out on their own with no resources available. You can't go to a shelter to sleep. You can't get food stamps. You have no address or residence. Foster care is generally where you end up, and that's generally where people are trying to run from.
And that's exactly the reason why I asked the question, because the information that you just gave, when my listeners are listening to it, it's the same way that I'm listening to it. When you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't sound like it makes sense, and then you turn around and you give that information, now it makes sense. And I want to make sure that my listeners are on point to actually understanding that what may make common sense to us as normal people, when you have someone that's living this life and that is in turmoil, this is common sense and this is the reality. And I want to make sure that we articulated that to our listeners, because I don't want her to be for people to be attacking her. I want people that listens to this podcast to embrace their story and look to the right and look to the left of them and look at their own child and start paying attention, because we are people by nature that thinks everyone is good. And a lot of times these people that are doing these horrific things are our basketball coaches, our bankers, our friends, a family, and these are people that we trust. And they look normal. And then at night or on the internet, they take advantage of little kids like this. And it pisses me off. And that's the reason why I wanted to have this conversation. And I'm sorry, Christy, for interrupting.
We're almost to the end of the story, in case anyone's wondering. Okay, so I followed this blind girl to, like, I got on the bus, I sat behind her, we transferred buses, sat behind her, followed her a couple of blocks, and she split off and went her own direction. And I found the first female that was like probably a professor, adult looking person, and I was like, hey, can I talk to you? And she was like, hey. And then I told her all of the things that I just told you. And she like jaw on the ground, and she was like, okay, follow me. And she brought me to Arizona State University's legal services department, and they have a lawyer there that's for the students. And I assume that he mostly would deal with like probably like landlord tenant type stuff. He was not expecting what walked in his office that day. And so he called the dean of the architecture school and the director of student housing and the lady that ran the psychology department. And they all like came in this office, and I repeated the story. And then basically the dean got this yellow slip of paper, and he wrote on it, waive all fees, and then he told me to take it to the registrar, and then the lawyer filed to have me legally emancipated, and then filed to have my social security checks redirected from my mom to me, and then started the process to sue my mom for restitution.
Yes,
And like did a bunch of other stuff. And then the therapist set up weekly sessions with me. And then the director of student housing took me to Walmart, and she bought me sheets and notebooks and deodorant. And then I started college the next day. And so yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was good. But the thing is that, like, and other trafficking survivors will get what I'm about to say, is like, didn't get better. That wasn't the end. Like, that wasn't the end of bad shit happening to me. And like, a lot more bad stuff happened. So I went to ASU for 2 semesters, and then everyone was like, you're so smart, you should go to a better college. So the one thing that the pedophile had taught me was that no one really does their job, and if you're just very direct with people and tell them what to do, they'll just do it. And so I wanted to move back to New York. I don't know why. I'm like a fly to like a bug zapper. I've always just like been very drawn to New York City. And so anyway, I decided to fly from Arizona to New York, and I walked onto the campus of Pratt Institute and marched right into their admissions department. And I was like, hey, I'm going to start going here. And they were like, you have to apply. And I was like, I'm not going to apply. Just enroll me. I'm starting. And they were like, okay. So they did. And the truth is, they should not have done that, because I did not have the math skills to be attending such a prestigious university. But I started the architecture program there, and I kept falling asleep every day. And at this time now, I'm 17, turning 18. And they were like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, you on drugs? And I was like, no. And they were like, if you can't handle the workload, you can't be here. And I was like, no, that's not it. I just really tired. And so then 2 years into architecture school at Pratt, I was pushing my wooden project through a bandsaw, and I fell asleep and my finger went through the saw. And then I got rushed to the emergency room, and they had to stitch up my finger, and I was laying in the hospital bed and watching the Discovery Health Channel, and this doctor named Dr. Orrin Davinsky diagnosed someone with something called Klein-Levin syndrome. And I was like, that's what's wrong with me. And so I didn't care where this man was on the planet. I was going to go see this very specific doctor. Turns out that he was the head of the NYU Epilepsy and Neurology Center. So
Right in New York City.
yeah, so I went to see him, and long story short, sleep study and everything, it turns out that I have extremely severe narcolepsy with cataplexy. And so a lot of people over the years have asked me, how did you survive like the situation with Brian? Like how did you get through that? And honestly, the truth is, undiagnosed narcolepsy will get you right through human trafficking, no problem. I just pretty much slept through that whole thing. And so I got diagnosed, and Pratt expelled me for the finger thing. And so then I decided I didn't want to be an architect anyway. Again, rewind with the story back to ASU. I met this guy named Jeff Funicello, who was an Olympic wrestler, and he taught me American pancration, which is like ground fighting. And then I moved to New York City to go to Pratt, and I was on Craigslist, and I saw this ad that said $100,000 to the best fighter. And I was like, for $100,000, like, go for it. So I showed up to this like taping of this TV show called The Iron Ring on BET. And there was like 300 gigantic muscular black men and me. And they were like, are you sure you want to try out? And I was like, yes, let's do it. And the producers of the show were like these little Jewish guys, and they were just like, you're not the demographic we're looking for.
This fierce white girl.
Yeah, but they wanted me to I think they didn't want me to sue them, but basically they got me sponsored on this jujitsu team. And so I started training in jujitsu every day. And then I was going to Pratt, and that was right when MySpace was dying and Facebook was becoming a thing. And rewind, I always knew that I had this long lost uncle named Frank who was into martial arts, who was my dad's long lost brother, but I didn't know much about him. Facebook became a thing. I found Frank. Turns out he's a very famous 10th degree grandmaster of Kung Fu.
Wow.
He lived about an hour north of the city. So I would train in Kung Fu with him 3 days a week, and then train in Jiu-Jitsu 4 days a week. And then I started teaching martial arts at Columbia University. And so anyway, then Pratt expelled me. And so like a normal person, on June 20th, 2009, I met a stranger on the internet. And then on July 3rd, 2009, I met this stranger in person. And then on July 6th, 2009, I got married to this stranger and moved to Jacksonville, North Carolina, to Camp Lejeune. And this person was a Marine. And so I opened a mixed martial arts school, and then I built the school up from literally nothing. So I started out in a USO and then signed a lease on a commercial space, and like literally
Really exciting.
Yeah. So I had like about 300 students over the next 4 years. But then, 2 deployments to Afghanistan and all that, 24 years old, we got divorced. So I moved to South Florida and didn't know what I was going to do. And I was going to stay at my sister's house. And so then my sister was like, you need to go out and like hang out with people your own age. So I decided, in my entire life, I've never tasted a sip of alcohol, tried any drugs, or smoked anything ever. So I was like, okay, I'll get a job as a shot girl at this bar. And I didn't know that means that you're supposed to drink the shots. And so the first night I sold 0 shots and the person didn't pay me. So he was like, come back tomorrow. So I came back the next day, and there was this girl there, and she was wearing like these thigh-high leather boots, and her boobs were pushed up to her face, and she had this corset and red lipstick, and she was selling shots left and right. And I was like, what does she know that I don't know? And so then I started talking to her, and it turned out that she was a stripper, and I was like, you whore. And so then like throughout the night, I asked her the same 5 questions that everyone asks me, which are like, how much money do you make? Do you have to have sex with the managers? What happens in a private room? Like a couple other questions like that. And she answered all my questions. And then I was like, do you think that I could be a stripper? And she was like, I don't care. And I was like, will you teach me? And she was like, no. And I was like, damn. So then I went home and I told my alcoholic best friend, whose name was Mick. I was like, Mick, I'm gonna strip, but only one time. It's gonna be my little secret. I'm never gonna tell anyone. And so we like for 3 weeks we did this bizarre amount of research where I dragged him around South Florida, and we went to all these strip clubs, and I had like a notebook, and I was taking notes on what the girls were doing and like what they were wearing and stuff. And then I read like 1,000 online forums and felt like I was ready. So I walked into Scarlett's on Saturday night at 1 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I want to be a stripper. And they were like, you trying to get on stage right now? And I was like, no, this is, jam-packed club. That club is huge. It has like 300 girls working. And so they were like, why don't you come back Sunday tomorrow at like 4 in the afternoon? And I was like, okay. And
what's this in Florida?
Oh, it's in Hallandale Beach, which is near Fort Lauderdale. So then I go on Sunday at 4 o'clock, and they like told me to put on my outfit, which was like the ugliest $12 grossest thing you could imagine. And again, in my mind, I was only ever going to do this one time. Like it was going to be like a secret. I was never going to tell anyone. And so they hired me, which was shocking to me because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And then I like realized that I had to give my first lap dance, and I did not take notes on how to do that. So this morbidly obese man named Mauricio was like so excited to be the first lap dance that I ever gave. So he takes me in the back and he's like, okay, you have to start dancing. And I was just like awkwardly in the corner, and he's like, no, you have to touch me. And so I like reached out and touched his shoulder, and it was really awkward. And he was like, no, you have to sit on me. And he turned me around and he put me on his fat belly, and he was like jiggling me back and forth. And I was just like, like I don't know what was going on. And then he pushed me off and he was like, that's the worst lap dance I ever got. And then he gave me $240 and stormed out of the club. And I was like, okay, bye. And so that day I made $1,400, and I was like, I'll be back tomorrow. And so then I worked at Scarlett's for a year, and it was terrible. Like that is the worst club. They're so mean there.
So in 2014, you were
Yeah.
in Florida, and
Uh-huh.
you had entered another dimension of your life as a stripper.
Yeah.
2016, we're going to fast forward because we've been running a little long on this.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
You are now. You're
Super fast. 2015, I started a multi-million-dollar class action lawsuit against this human trafficker in Key West. So then I had to leave
now
Key
we got to
West.
back up. Now we got to back up. I didn't know that story. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was working at the Star and I hated it. So I decided I wanted to move to Key West. So I moved to Key West and I got a job at this club called the Red Garter. And you know, at first it was cool because human trafficking does not look unusual is the problem. And the owner of the Red Garter is like this white-haired 800-pound beet red human being, and he's married to this woman who is like really attractive, and she's a psychiatrist, like an MD psychiatrist, an actual psychiatrist. So it's very confusing about what's going on there. And long story short, over about a year of working there, I found out that uh he was he had boats, and he would go and get illegal immigrants from various places in South America and bring them to Key West and then sell the girls into human trafficking. And he would take the girls into like the private rooms, and he'd force them to like give him oral sex, because I don't think he could have real sex. And it was really disgusting. So, not knowing what else to do about that, I contacted this attorney and told him, and he was like, well, the best thing to do is start a class action lawsuit for labor violations. And I didn't know any better. So I was like, okay. So we started this $6.6 million lawsuit. And my lawyer was like, you need to leave Key West because he's going to try to kill you. And I was like, okay. So I fly away back to New York, because I always go back to New York. And a couple days later, like somebody calls me and they were like, hey, have you heard from Jason? Jason was the manager of this club. And I was like, no, why would I hear from Jason? And they're like, no one's heard from him. He's missing. He hasn't shown up for work. So I started like calling around and all this stuff. Very long story short, I'm panicking. Jason was both a Marine and Army veteran. He had serious PTSD, but really good guy. Everyone liked him. And so someone calls me and they're like, Jason's car was found abandoned in Marathon, like the key in the middle. And I was like, what? So I'm like freaking out. I don't know what happened to Jason. I don't know. Like, I called the Coast Guard. I called everybody I could think of. I called the embassy in like all these like islands around Key West. So the Cuban embassy, the American embassy in Cuba calls me and they're like, hi, we have your friend. And I was like, what the actual fuck? And so it turns out that the owner of the Red Garter, he had these boats that belonged to people from the country of Georgia, and he was paying Jason to go to Cuba to pick up these girls to sell them into human trafficking. So Jason was trapped in like a Cuban prison, and I don't know this guy. Like, it's not like he's like my brother or my friend or like any. So I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. So basically, not knowing his side of the story, not knowing anything, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna contact his best friend, and that's the end of that. That's the end of my like involvement in this situation, because it got real. Like, the Department of Homeland Security was calling me, and like this investigation was going on, and it was a lot. So anyway, I moved to New York and decided that I was going to become a stand-up comedian, because
There we go.
like, this shit's crazy. Like, how freaking crazy is my life, for real? So I did not know what to do. So I signed up for an open mic at like this random club on the east side, and I showed up at like 5:30 in the afternoon, and I get on stage and I'm like, hi, I'm a stripper and this is my life. And everyone was like, wait, what? And so like, normally when people start doing stand-up comedy, everyone's like, shut the fuck up, like, we don't want to hear you and your dick jokes and your like
Right. Right.
nonsense. For me, very opposite experience. People were like, go on. And
They'd never heard of this presented in any way, let
Right.
alone through comedy, right?
About your comedy career, because we
Yeah.
need to wrap up because we have another guest coming on. You have been on World Star Comedy. You have been at the Comedy Cellar. You have appeared on the Howard Stern show. Am I correct? And
Yes.
you've headlined at numerous places. You are
Yep.
not just a face that had just shown up and said, I think I'm funny. You're the real deal.
Yeah,
All right.
funny.
Yeah, no, I've seen some of your stuff. You're a real deal. The only difference is when you showed up a brunette, I was looking for a blonde. Where did she go?
I've been studying to get into law school. I don't have time to dye my hair right now.
All right, no problem. Well,
Make it happen, Christine.
we do have to wrap it up. You've shared a lot of information with us, and I hope that people that have stayed with us, that have listened to it, that have ingested this conversation. She's a young lady. She's a beautiful young lady. Her story is true. All right. This could be your daughter. This could be your neighbor's daughter. You could be your best friend's daughter. This could be a child that's sitting in your classroom that's going through this and you don't know. There's got to be signs. All right. I see the commercials, and I asked Kristen earlier, I see the commercials with the hand signs or whatever. What should people look out for when someone is?
People should be aware of changes of behavior. People should be aware if they see the sign, which was really designated by a group, the Canadian Women's Foundation during COVID, for people who were online with to show if they were having domestic abuse and violence problems. They would raise their hand without signaling or concerning a household, and that went for children as well. This was designed during COVID when people were online. And if you see this sign, you call 911 and you let them know. And that's a universal sign that is now responsible for rescuing a fair amount of kids, young adults, and other people who are in distress, women and girls and boys who are exposed to violence and sex trafficking.
Christy, how do people reach you?
Instagram is at stripper comedy. My website is strippercomedy.com. And my book is for sale on Amazon. It's called Something Ridiculous by Christy Monroe.
I got to get a copy of that. I did look that up. I failed to mention it. She has a book on Amazon. Ridiculous. Say that again.
Something ridiculous.
All right. So I have a young man from Ohio that has a show, Ridiculous. So that kind of stuck in my head. Christine, resources. people that are looking for help and have a story to tell outside of reaching out to me, how do they get help? Through your organization? Through
me
your,
or-
both of you. Christine,
You go ahead, Christine.
Christy,
Sorry, Christy.
Go ahead, Kristen. Kristen, you go. You take this one.
Yeah, so there are lots of different ways. 911 is really the easiest. There are trafficking hotlines that have specific numbers, but if you call 911 and you tell them, I suspect that there's something going on, or I see something that's not right. We have that saying, see something, say something. If you see something, you say something. There is no hotline that would ever say, don't be ridiculous, that can't possibly be happening. Law enforcement needs to know. They would rather have hundreds of, incorrect calls and things that didn't amount to something than know that one child or one person who's a victim of abuse and who is being trafficked falls through the cracks. 911 is really the best way.
I would also say that if there's ever any trafficking victims that were listening to this, girl, tell a stripper. We will swoop you up so freaking fast and we will knock your trafficker out. Like, we'll take off our pleaser and beat them in the face with it. Strippers, believe it or not, are some of the most diehard, dedicated people. We won't let anything bad happen to anyone.
Yep.
I just became a fan of a stripper. That's all right.
Absolutely.
I want to thank both of my guests, Christine Seymour, Christy Monroe, comic, author, warrior champion. I can't begin to say how many things that positive about you. I am very proud of you. You're very brave for sharing your story. We went long today, normal, not normal for us, but I wanted to thank you. I hope my listeners learned today. If you want more information or a way to contact Christine Seymour or Christy Monroe, you can go to information at RMK Productions.net. If you want to see a copy of this podcast, go to our YouTube page, RMK Productions and Network. And I would just want to thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you for having us, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you. My grandfather always said that when you get to a position that you can help someone, it's your duty to do so. Reach one, teach one, and we'll fade to black and we're out.